Hey, welcome to Vortex Garage, and this is our long 460 DT tractor. Now, if you've been checking our channel out, you know in the past, in the last several years, there's been a few videos we've had on this, and it's been some time since we've had any content on it. And well, we actually wanted to preface the video today because we're going to show you some video that was shot all the way back in spring of 2019 and never put on YouTube. You remember 2019, you know, the good old years. Good old times, whatever it is. So we've got this video from back in 2019 we're going to show you. We were working on the hydraulic steering, and we're going to show you we had to remove the entire cowl and fuel tank and everything to access the hard lines that are up on the hydraulic assembly on the bottom of the steering column. And we didn't shoot video of removing everything because we did all that and then took the piece down to have it reworked at the shop. And then basically this video is going to be us talking about that, putting that stuff back together, and then getting this thing running. The hope at the end of that video was that we'd be using it. However, not to spoil anything, we did find a couple things at the end of that video that set us back. And well, since then we've taken care of them. So we're gonna come back here after that little piece of video and show you what we did to fix it and then wrap up. Hey, welcome to the Vortex Garage. Today we're working a little bit on our old long 460 DT tractor. Finally getting to some jobs that we should have done over a year ago to try to get this thing running reliably. What we're working on today is the steering hydraulics. This has a hydraulic steering setting on it, or setup on it, and we'll show you that in a second. But the big problem we had was that we had a burst flex line, but we also had some problems with the hard lines that we're going to show you up close and kind of show you what the deal was. So first off, let me zoom back in. I zoomed in time, big time, because I was following a rat snake, which apparently is living in the old Mercury. So cool. Anyway, as you can see, this is the old flex line, and it had a break right along here. As you can see, all this dry rotted. It was leaking pretty bad out of here, about ready to burst. And this one doesn't look all that much better. But the big problem with this is look at these twists. It looks like whoever owned this tractor before had attempted to replace these lines at one point, and based on the twists, it actually looks like, well, it's hard to tell. It almost looks like they did it while they were tightening them, but even while loosening them, if you don't put a wrench here and brace the line and just try to twist these off, you're going to end up twisting the hard line, and that's what somebody did, and they put some pretty serious kinks in that line, which was really restricting the pressure flow and the fluid flow into the cylinder. So this is the steering setup on this tractor. It's a hydraulic ram. It's a dual action, so it has two ports, which hopefully you can see. Let me move the tachometer cable out of the way. It has a port here, which is a little dark on the camera, and then one up here because it's in the sun. You can probably see it a little better. And you have the ram, which attaches to a pitman arm, which attaches to your front axle. So as this ram pushes or pulls, it pulls or pushes the pitman arm, thus turning the wheels. And then there's a track bar that goes to the other side and turns the corresponding wheel. Now that's all run through these hydraulic hoses, which come up to your steering column. This is where the steering wheel will go. You can see we had to take a lot apart to get to this. And then you have this set up with some banjo fittings. This is basically a hydraulic valve. So this would be your feed from your power steering pump, I think. Now this is the return. This is the return to the power steering reservoir. And then you would have the feed from the pump. And then you have these outputs. And depending on your position of the wheel, as you're turning, it would open valving up within this unit, and it would push fluid out of one of the output ports, which would then correspond to either pulling or pushing that ram and adjusting your steering. And then of course on center, they would both be closed. The ram would stay in a neutral spot. So what we've done is, as you can see, we've put some caps where our bolts go because we did remove the lines. The unfortunate part is with these banjo fittings, this is where the fuel tank sat. There is really just no way to get to those banjo fittings and actually get the bolts to come out without completely stripping down the back half and the instrument panel of the tractor here. So that's what we did. The steering wheel came off, the instrument panel and the gauges, the switches, and then we went ahead and pulled that apart, took the rear cowling off, and then lifted out the fuel tank, leaving the fuel lines in place. Once we did that, as you can see, everything's super, super accessible. And for the switches and everything, I didn't really want to disturb the wiring too much, so I just, undid the bolts and took everything out. these kind of retainer nuts here, and then put them back on so I wouldn't forget them. Same with the key switch. And luckily just disconnected the harnesses that go to the instrument cluster. And then there's this single plug here that goes on the side of the cowl. You've got a couple of return lines, which I've capped off and marked. And then you've got your main diesel fuel line, which I have capped off. And then I basically came in here and cleaned everything up, got all the dirt and grime out of it so that we could go ahead and move forward. Now let me show you really quick how we got the hoses replaced, because one of the things with this tractor being a kind of an odd design is it has a lot of weird fittings on it, a lot of weird sizes. So basically what I do whenever I have a hydraulic hose that needs repair, there's a place, a town over, and they've got kind of an on-demand build hoses for you. They service the construction industry. And so you just basically take your bad hose down there and they make it on the spot. They're really, really cool. Well, in this particular case, they had to fabricate the actual hose, so they sent it off to Baltimore, actually, Baltimore, Maryland. They have a fabrication shop. They went ahead and sent it off there. And I got them back this morning, went and picked them up. So these are the new hoses right here. And I'm going to lay them out on the ground here. And then I'm going to lay this one down because I'm wrangling too many cameras, and we're going to kind of show you what they did. All right, so only a few shadows. But anyways, you can see this was a hard line with this bracket brazed on, and it would kind of support these two lines, and then they would go into these flex hoses, which go into the ram. So they actually cut the original hard lines, and then they put some flare fittings on them, and they did a really, really nice job. If you look at these, I'm pretty happy with how this came out. And that allowed them to keep these banjo fittings. These banjo fittings were a weird size. I think they were a 21 millimeter or something like that. And so I think it was easier for them to just reuse this hard line because it was in otherwise good shape. Put the right fitting on here, convert it to flex line, and then have the right fittings on the end of the flex line. So they've done that with both of them. Now I did lose the brazed on piece here because there wouldn't have been enough material to make those flares with this. And I told them, don't worry about putting this back on because I'd really like to get these set and make sure that they're kind of articulated the way that I'd like them, and make sure that also I can get wrenches on these when the fuel tank's back in. So I'm really kind of take my time when I put these on to make sure these are serviceable, so when the flex lines need a replacement years down the road, I can do that pretty easily. Because this is so small, I'm not sure I'm actually going to need this brace anymore because of how these fit on. So really it's going to be a matter of putting them on and seeing what we need, because this is now basically a custom hose setup as opposed to what was original. Now I'll tell you, having these long tractors, there's a lot of parts available for them, but then there's a lot of things that get really hard to find, or you have to go to tractor scrap yards basically. And these lines weren't really readily available that I could see. So having a shop that could take these, send them off, and have them fabricated for me was pretty cool. And the turnaround was really quick on them. It was less than a week. And the only downside, $330 for this. And that's not really that bad. I'm not complaining about that price, but I will tell you that when it comes to paying the labor to have something custom fabricated, you are going to end up paying a little more than you would have if it was just replacing the flex lines. So it was a bummer that whoever twisted those hard lines did that, because it made all this work having to pull all this stuff apart just to get them off. What could have been literally a 10-minute job taking these flex lines off and then taking them to the shop for 15 minutes, coming back and putting them back on, has become a big ordeal of taking half the darn back section of the tractor apart, custom making some lines, and now reassembling stuff and making sure it fits right. All right, so hopefully you can see me on this camera up here. What we've done, I've moved this camera to give you a better view of what we're dealing with in here, and I'm going to go ahead and take off our little caps that we made. A little bit of fluid seeping out, but as you can see, these are just pipe fitting adapters with a cap on it, and they've been out here for a couple days. This one already got a little bit of surface rust on it. We'll take this one off, and there we go. So I'm fairly certain this is the bigger output one, and it's going to need to go on the bottom there, so it'll go kind of like that. And I've got our banjo bolts. If you're wondering where I've been, and I haven't left the cameras running, had I disappeared for a little while, it is 100% because I put these in a safe place where I would never forget where they were, and I forgot where they were. Okay, we'll put the copper washers on, or crush washers, and then get this started. Behind our wiring here. Getting used to this other camera and how it wants to act. So, but anyway, we've got that in. So both of these are loose. Pretty sure I got them the right way. So the top one is the smaller and slash inboard hose that goes on the inside of the ram. And then the bottom one is the bigger one that goes on the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and route those and just see if I can get them finger tight. And the good news is I'm kind of seeing here, you can kind of see how these feed down, and then they'll go into these connectors right here. And I'm pretty certain I shouldn't have too much trouble getting to these. I might have the cowling sitting on right here, so this might not be the best thing in the world. I can't remember exactly where the cowling fits. So we'll see when it's all back together. But in theory, I'll be able to put wrenches on here and get these off in a pinch. Not the best, but honestly, I don't expect these to break anytime soon. If I reach up and in, that's the smaller of the two, and it should go to our back fitting right there. And then the larger of the two will loop around and go to that one. So on the old setup, this one had looped over itself, and wasn't really keen on that setup. It doesn't look like I'm going to have to do that, but it probably wouldn't hurt to maybe take it around like this. It's kind of what they did on the other one. And I'm going to make sure that it stays out of the way of everything. All right, so we've gone ahead and got our hoses mounted up. You can kind of see a little better from this angle. Then we went ahead and looped that one kind of like it did from the factory, at least what was on it before. And as you can see, we've got them both bolted up to our steering ram. So we can go ahead and start working on putting the rest of our components back together here. All right, so we've got our lines connected, everything's tightened down. We're ready to go ahead and put our fuel tank back in. So I'm going to move these lines out of the way so they don't make it difficult to get this in. Okay, so we got the wiring harness moved, got the lines out of the way. We got the bottom line, which is going to connect up to our tank kind of down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just heave the tank up here and drop it in. Had a lot more fuel in it than I thought it did when I pulled it out, and I just ended up heaving the thing out, but I did go ahead and drain a little bit of it and fill up my 5-gallon diesel can. So got a little bit of it out. Should be manageable. Tank slightly less heavy, but still pretty darn heavy. All right, now we'll climb up. I'll just pick it up and drop it in. Nice and simple. Is out of the way. There we go. All we got to do is go ahead and get our line hooked back up. So to kind of make it a little easier, I'm using this block to keep our tank up. That way I can come down under here, pop our flexible line loose, and hopefully get it back on our drain. All right, so I went ahead and changed my shirt. The microphone kept folding over on itself, and I'm sure that sounds wonderful. And we've got shade again here, so it's actually not that hot out. So go ahead and take out our wood piece. Then we'll get that to settle down, literally. Coming over here, and there we go. All right, so we'll go ahead and get these on. All right, those are on. All right, I got reminded of these when I noticed that wiring harness didn't have a spot to attach to. These are the straps for the fuel tank. Would be bad to forget these. I'm sure I would have figured it out pretty quick. Okay, just got that one on. Okay, real quick, I'm going to go find out what size sockets I need. Is that one in? I feel like it isn't. It is in. Okay. Should put this back the way I had it. I have no idea why the washer was there. It does nothing of value. But that's enough to get our strap bolt started. The rest of it's easy. Cool. Now we can do our wiring harness. There you go. All right, so our wiring is on. Fuel lines are on, tank straps are on, ground strap is on, but it's not tight. Probably tighten that with this, like a charlatan. Because I am too lazy to walk over and get the probable 8mm socket that this is, or less. There. Now, I see nothing stopping us from putting this cowl on at this point. Almost there. There we go. Just get her to line up a little bit. Whew. I hit that, it sounded like a wasp. So there shouldn't be any wasp nests in here, but there might be one in there. All right. Don't worry, we'll put that on in a second. All right, so we just about got our instrument panel back on. What you missed was getting all the wiring hooked up, our tachometer cable hooked up, and our key put in. So what you did miss, that because I just turned the cameras on and I didn't have them running, was to get the key in. It's kind of a big high amp switch block. There's not really a lot of relays on an old tractor like this. So the key itself is pretty big, it's about this size behind the dash panel. So it actually interfered with our throttle handle. So what I had to do was actually loosen the cowl so I could slip it behind it. Most likely I took this off after I had already loosened the cowl when I was removing it. So that meant I could go ahead and get everything set up just the way I wanted it. Get this rubber piece moved up to the top. If you remember, I was showing you this was kind of down under there, so we got that taken care of. I've got all the wiring hooked up. I've got our mechanical temperature gauge that we put in. If you remember, there's an old Vortex Garage video where we took an old M18 oil plug and drilled it out and tapped it so that we could adapt the metric M18 to a standard fitting for a cheap aftermarket coolant gauge. So we are pretty much all set. I've got that plumbed, got it sealed. Pretty much got to go ahead and get this piece in. This is our starter switch. I replaced this about a year ago, I want to say. So remember, the old one worked, but of all things, this piece had snapped off, and I was using vice grips to start the thing. Okay, we'll want to tighten that a little later on. I also went ahead and replaced these. That's why I have this kit out here with these U bolts, or whatever you call them, U-clips and screws. All right, got to find the nut. I'm like 6,000% sure that even though I left that sitting there, I left the nut right in the dish of the steering wheel. Let me look in this little piece back here. I mean, let's be real, you don't really need the nut. Just a couple zip ties will do it. I found it. I put it in my rolling work cart where I would not lose it. I lost it. Should be perfect to bend that washer up. That means our cap can go back on. Whenever our cap goes on. Is this a hammer? Seems to be. So what I want to do after I kind of get the engine running, go ahead and lower the hood, and we're going to do a test with the boom. We're going to see if the boom articulates and works as it should. And we'll make sure that the steering works, since that's what we replaced, and we'll check for leaks. Let's go ahead and fire it up. Hopefully. All right, so we've got our key here. We're going to put the key on, let's make sure we're in neutral first. So you got our 8-ball shift knob here. Make sure this is also in neutral. That's our slow, fast 2-speed gear there. Main gearbox is in neutral. Clutch depressed, brakes on. Key in position 2. The nice thing is I've kind of fixed some of these. We've actually got warning lights for oil pressure and whatnot. Okay, put ourselves in idle. Fuel release off, or fuel cut off. And let's see if this fires up. Uh-oh. Nope. I was afraid of that. Very simple. We'll work on permanent mounting those soon. Alright. Back at what we were doing. On. Oh, nice. Fired up pretty good. Let's do a boom test. Oh, that's working. That's up, 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 up. And does it stay? Kind of curious how good those cylinders are. All right, let's see if the front works. Drop it down. Bring it back up. It's wanting to pull itself back down. I wonder if those cylinders are holding. Or if they're bleeding down a little bit. It might be the weight of the actual boom. So let's try putting this down. Pick you back up. Yep, our steering's working. It's got a little bit of play to it, but hey, you know. Yeah, we're leaking out of that hard line still. Let me show you. And it's not really nice looking fluid. You'll see it. See it? So I think this is going to be a good opportunity to go ahead and change the hydraulic filter for the main lift hydraulics. We're probably going to need to drain that and pretty much refill it with new. But our steering is dry. Our steering is working. It's a little bit notchy. I think it might still have some air in it that it's working out. It's actually feeling a little better now. Yeah, it's actually getting easier the more I work the air out. So all in all, I'd say that was a pretty successful first test and first move. So we're going to go ahead and check a few things out, and then we'll be able to run this thing a little more and actually start putting it to work. All right, so now that we're back in present day, as you saw at the end of that video, there was a couple things that you might have caught that went wrong. The first one I think we talked about, which was a leak in the hydraulics here, where we're going to tell you what we did to fix that. We actually fixed that later on. And another issue we had is the big thing that stopped us is we found out the hydraulics and the boom were bad in the front for the front bucket. So we had to fix those. So what we're going to do, we're going to walk around with this camera. We're going to show you a couple of things that we've done recently, what we fixed, and then that'll bring you up to present day. All right, so the first thing was there was a leak in here, and let me kind of zoom in here. The leak was coming right out of this unit right here, and this is, I think, one of the feeds for the secondary hydraulic pump. And it's not for, it comes off the lift hydraulics, but it's for like a secondary attachment. And what I ended up doing there was when I took this apart, I took these off, there was no gasket in there. It looked like just two machine surfaces. And that pipe actually goes down. It goes underneath and across, and let me show you. But it comes up into the greasy mess here, and then it goes up all the way into the engine there. So basically it's a pretty complex line to actually take off of the tractor. So what we ended up doing was just removing the bolts here, getting enough play on this to move it out of the way. And then we actually took some high pressure gasket material and cut a gasket for it, and then put a crush gasket in the center. Because nothing else I tried just normal gaskets. Anything would leak. I tried, obviously sealant's not going to work. This is high pressure hydraulics. But my solution to it, just using junk I had in the shop, was some high pressure gasket material and a metal crush gasket in the center, and then bolting it back down, and it has been leak free. And I actually don't use those second hydraulics, so I'm pretty well content with how that's working for the time being. So another issue that I had that's kind of common on these is that they sit out in the weather, they actually will get water into the transmission case oil. And I was having that problem again. So I ended up draining and flushing that, putting fresh hydraulic fluid in, which helped get the lift hydraulics working, because the lift hydraulics on this tractor actually run off the transmission, which runs on hydraulic fluid. So I did get the 3-point system working. That was actually one of the latest things that I did, and I've just sort of got it mocked up here and working. Couldn't find the hitch pins that I had, so I used a big grade 8 bolt. So as you can tell, it's just for mock-up, not for actual heavy-duty work. We'll get the right stuff in it, but that was actually kind of a pain. The lift didn't want to lift. I didn't even have anything on it, and I was really struggling with it, and I think it just had some air that had to bleed out, and then I got it working. And part of the thing with this tractor is just figuring out how everything works, because a lot of the labels are either worn off, and the user's manual, I don't have one, and they're hard to find online. But the good news is we were able to get those rear hydraulics working, so we've got our 3-point system, and it works. So one of the cool things about this tractor when I got it was the fact that it had the boom in the front, which you could do some scooping. So think about road maintenance kind of stuff. I can scoop up some gravel, can lay some gravel down or some dirt or whatever, and then I can use the box blade in the back, smooth everything out. So pretty cool. Well, as you saw in that last video, and I don't know how clear it was, but basically the boom hydraulics in the front that hold the actual bucket and articulate the bucket we're not holding. So I took this apart, took the booms off, and one of them's pretty decent, but the other one, if you put it upside down, the ram just slides out of it. I mean, the seals are completely shot in it. So I couldn't find a place, and this is like in the midst of 2020, it was hard to find a place local that would actually rebuild the cylinder. I was gonna have to go a couple towns away or ship them off. And I ended up got to looking online, and I found, by measuring the hydraulics and looking at them, I found it was actually pretty inexpensive to buy 2 hydraulic cylinders from Wen. So I went ahead and did that, and let's show you what we got. So here are the 2 new hydraulic cylinders, and I thought I was really smart by doing this. So I picked these up and put them in, and as you can see, they're in and they're working. Everything's great. But one of the things that I didn't necessarily recognize was the ports, and I didn't catch this in the drawing, but the ports on the old ones were on the side, and they were opposite each other so that you actually had a shorter hydraulic line in between. These ones are on the top, so I had to get some 90 fittings, and then I had to get new hydraulic lines because the original ones were an inch too short. So awesome. So I had to spend the money for 2 new hydraulic lines and then a couple of fittings. Not a huge deal. I think these things were only like $60 a pop or something like that. But at the end, it is in, and the boom and the bucket, everything works perfectly. The only other thing that's really left that we took care of and actually did today was we adjusted the brakes, because the brakes were kind of wonky and didn't really work. So we adjusted them and hopefully they work now. We followed the procedures in the book to do that. They were quite a bit out of adjustment when I went in there to do it. So I'm hopeful that we're good there. The only other thing was the diesel fuel in here was like pretty much original from when I bought it, and who knows how long it had been in there since then. It smelled horrid. I had drained a bunch of it early on and replaced it, but it sat out for years. So I ended up draining all that out and just put 5 gallons of fresh diesel in it. So hopefully we'll have some nice clean diesel to run it. But other than that, it's pretty good. So what I think I'll do here is move cameras around. We'll fire it up. We'll show you the boom working. We'll show you the back working. And that'll probably be it for today because we're going to be running out of daylight. But at some point we'll follow up. We're going to be doing some work with this. We'll try to bring the camera along and show you this thing in action. But hopefully we've met the goalpost, or we're at the goalpost. Let's hope it doesn't move again, right? So fingers crossed, knock on metal, whatever you got to do. All right, let's catch up. We'll start this thing up. All right, that did it. All right, so what we wanted to show you, ignore our coolant light. We actually, or no, that's the charging light. So we probably do have a charging issue. But one of the things I wanted to show you was our boom. You can see it on the other camera, hopefully, yeah. And see how they hold? Before they wouldn't hold, so. All right, so I want to show how the lift works. So there's our 3-point. And that is simply with this float and draft thingy. It's a little wonky how it works, but let's just lift it up and we'll show you. And it's nice, it works, the height adjustment, you set it where you want to set it. And as you can see on the other camera, the piece will sit where you leave it. And it seems fairly responsive. It seems to work good. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it off for the time being because, well, it's dark out. We're not really going to be taking it anywhere. I just wanted to show you the thing fires up, even though I got to fix the battery. So it's 99.99% done, right? Other than that, it's running good. All of our hydraulics are working. Our 3-point is working. Everything's pretty good. Hopefully, as we get some of that new diesel fuel going in, we won't have as much smoke from the old diesel coming out, and we'll get it out and we'll see how it runs. The only other thing you might have noticed, got an open piece here. This tractor has no rollover protection, or ROPS, R-O-P-S. I would like to get that installed of some sort before I use this thing for any real true hard work. I would prefer the safety of that. Tractor rollovers are pretty nasty. So now Long did have a rollover protection system on this tractor, and I did find one about 8 or 9 hours from here at a tractor salvage yard. So I might look to see if I can go down and get one of those. Basically, it attaches to the fenders. These fenders are structural. They're actually, within them, there's some pretty thick steel. And that would bolt and was the early ROPS protection that they had. Now the other option is I could look around at some local tractor shops. There are a lot of retrofits to older tractors. You can have a universal kit installed or have something engineered by a qualified tractor shop. I don't really think I'm that qualified to be doing that, especially with my little 110 MIG welder. So other than that, really just wanted to catch you up on where we are with this project and share it with you. And as we have more, you can find it here on Vortex Garage.